I arrived in Ecuador on January 4th, 2011. I actually remember that date very specifically, apparently. One, because I have been told by my trainer I was her birthday present, because her birthday was the day before, so I always connect those two in my mind. The first day in the mission. So we left Peru. We flew into, I was very grateful I wasn't by myself. I had my companion, Hermana Flores, with me. And so both of us were kind of talking about, we're like, oh, what's today going to be like? Or how different is Ecuador going to be than Peru? Because we were in Peru for 6 weeks. And so I remember we flew into Quito, flew into the airport, and there were a total of 4 missionaries on our plane who were coming to the mission. It was me and Hermana Flores, and then there were 2 elders. And we got to the airport, and we went through customs. And I felt like I was a pro because I'd gone through customs in Peru. So I was like, oh, Quito, no big deal. I can do this. So we got through the airport, and we went and picked up our bags. And then my mission president and his wife, so President and Sister Sloan, were there along with the assistants to pick us up. And I remember being so excited to see somebody who was a missionary. I was very, very excited to see them and to meet them. And so they picked us up, and we all got in. They had a snack for us. I don't remember what it was, but they had, I don't know, like a juice box and something. And so we all got on into this van. They put all of our bags in there, and then we all got in the van. And then my mission president, so President and Sister Sloan were driving in their own personal car. So they were in a separate vehicle, but then all the missionaries, we were together. And so as we were in the van going, the assistants were like, okay, so we're going to go up to the mission home just so that we can meet up again with President and Sister Sloan. And they're going to probably jump in this van because we were such a small group. and they're like, and then we're going to go somewhere special in Quito. And that's all we knew. We didn't know anything beyond that. And we're like, oh, okay. And so they were like, do you have any questions? And all of us were kind of like, I don't know. I don't know what to ask. And I remember it wasn't, Hermana Flores was the first person. So she was like, who's our trainers? Like, that's all she really wanted to know. Who's our first companions going to be? And the assistants were like, we're not going to tell you who has who. But they just told us their names. And so I don't remember who it was for the elders, but for the sisters, all that we got told was Hermana Jorge and Hermana Cooper. And so from their names, we could pretty much assume one of them is a Spanish speaker and one of them is an English speaker. And so we're like, oh, okay. So both of us were trying to figure out who was going to get who. But we didn't really think about it much. And so we got back up, we got to the mission home. And President and Sister Sloan jumped in the van with us. And then we continued on our way. And we got told we were going to a hill in Quito that has on top of it a statue of, I guess technically it's the Virgin, but it's called the Panaceo. And we'll explain more once we get up there, because we're like, okay. We're like, there's this statue up there. That's all we know. So we got up there, and as we were getting there, Sister Sloan asked us, she was like, you guys have umbrellas? And we're like, I was like, in my suitcase, but it's kind of buried. So thankfully they had extra umbrellas because they warned us that there was probably a high chance it was going to rain. So we're like, okay. And so we got out of the van. We all had our umbrellas. And the second we got out of the van, we hear this clap. No, we had walked down to where the statue was, and we'd sat down. And as soon as we sat down, we heard this huge clap of thunder. And we're like, oh no. And then it's 2 seconds later, whoosh, it was just downpour. So me and Hermana Flores were sharing an umbrella, trying to stay dry. I think the elders sadly didn't have an umbrella, so they were getting soaked. And then the two assistants, President Sloan and his wife, so the four of them were trying to share one umbrella to stay dry. And they were reading this paper to us. And the significance behind this hill is where the land was dedicated for proselytes, like the preaching of the gospel in Ecuador. And so it's a special place for the church. And so they were reading like the prayer that got said, but obviously we're all getting soaked. And so they eventually decided that it wasn't worth us to sit there and get completely wet, which was too late because we were already completely wet, to continue getting wet and continue to be freezing because it was probably about 50 degrees outside. Not to mention we are now wet, so made it even worse. So we ended up getting back in the van and we just went back to the mission home instead of staying up there. Normally they'd stay up there and they'd take pictures and whatnot. And so we went back to the mission home, and so we all got there and we were all soaking wet, but we were really happy to be inside where it was dry. And I remember right when we got in there, President Sloan was like, hey, I want each of you to go on the computer. He's like, you get a max of like 5 minutes. He's like, I just want you to send an email to your parents and letting them know that you made it safe and sound to Ecuador. And I was like, okay. And so there was no like reading the other emails. It was purely get on, send an email. I'm safe. I'm healthy. I'm in Ecuador. I'll talk to you on P-Day, which is like 6-7 days away. And so each of us took our turns and we did that. And then we were sitting there waiting, and other missionaries slowly started showing up. So the first two missionaries show up were sisters, actually. It was the mission nurse and her companion. And so we started talking with them and not knowing who anybody was. And then elders showed up, and then a trio. I was like, wait, yeah, a trio of sisters showed up. And I was like, okay. So then we kind of introduced ourselves to each other. And I got told afterwards that my companion, my trainer, already knew who she was getting, but she couldn't tell us because she had to wait. That was for President Sloan to tell us and not them. And so they were all just sitting there talking with us. And so this trio that walked in, it was Hermana Cooper, Hermana Castellani, and Hermana Bojorge. And so right off the bat, me and Hermana Flores, who'd come together, we recognized Hermana Cooper and Hermana Bojorge, and we're like, okay, obviously those are our trainers, but we don't know who's getting who. And so then we had a pizza party and had dinner, and we were all starving, so it was good to have pizza, and it was Papa John's pizza, and I didn't think I would see Papa John's pizza in Ecuador, but, you know, I did. And then we got pulled in individually to have our first interview with the mission president. And I still remember to this day that walking in and talking with President Sloan for the first time by myself, and his question was, why did you decide to serve a mission? And I sat there and kind of pondered for a while, and kind of gave him my life story about what happened with my family and my trials that I had of kind of going away from the church but coming back. And I think that whole experience of leaving and coming back, realizing what I was leaving behind when I wasn't involved in the church, kind of had a big deal in making me helping me decide to serve a mission. And so as I was thinking and trying to figure it out, the answer that came to my mind, and the basic one, was that I love my Lord and my Savior Jesus Christ, and I want others to know him, and I want other people to receive the blessings and that the church provides, that the gospel provides in my life, and that they can receive the same blessings. And we talked for a little bit more. I don't remember all of it, but I remember that part. And so then he thanked me, and he was very grateful. And he was like, I'm happy that you're here in the Quito mission, and I know you're supposed to be here. And that there are many people in this country, be it your companions, be it members of the church already, be it people on the street, that you are meant to meet, and you are meant to serve, and you are meant to love, and have a relationship with. And I remember bawling at that moment, but that's okay. And so he thanked me for my time, and then he asked me to send in another missionary. And so I left, and so I went out, and I was just a few minutes later, he came out, and then he asked us all to come together. And so it was a small group of us, and so we kind of had a little devotional thing, and he talked about different types of missionaries, 4 different types of missionaries: the happy missionaries, the going through the motion missionaries, sad missionaries. I don't remember the last one, but he had facial expressions to go with each of them, and I remember there was 4. And he's like, there's going to be days that you will be the sad missionary. There's going to be days you'll be the frustrated missionary, because you're going to get 100 doors slammed in your face and nothing's going to come out of it. And after all the like negative aspects, I was like, oh great, feeling great about this. He's like, however, there's always hope. And he's like, and deep down, remember who you're serving and remember why you're here. And he's like, even though you'll have those sad days and those sad moments and those frustrating moments, he was like, remember to be happy, and because that's going to be shown through your countenance and your actions, and your spirit, and other people will feel that. And so he continued, and then he was like, well, now it's time to tell everybody who your trainers are. The main thing that everybody was like anticipating. And so I remember, I think Hermana Flores was first, and she was with Hermana Bajorge. And then he went to the elders, and each of them got theirs. And then he was like, and Hermana Reed, you are very, very, very special. And I was like, okay. He's like, because you don't only get 1 trainer, you're getting, in essence, 2 trainers. And I was like, okay. So he's like, and you're with Hermana Cooper and Hermana Castellani, and you're going to be serving in Calderon. And I remember turning, and I was like so excited. And I gave both Hermana Cooper and Hermana Castellani a big hug. And shortly after this, we all kind of separated. We took a picture in the mission home of all of us together before we all separated and went to our own areas. My area was only by bus about an hour away. By taxi, probably about 40 minutes away, roughly. And so we left the mission home, and each of my companions had one of my big bags, and I had my carry-on and then my backpack. And walking down the street and walking down to the corner to try to call a taxi so that we could go back to our area. And I remember there was this lady, she was drunk, on the corner, and she was kind of yelling and saying, I have no idea what she was saying because I didn't speak Spanish at the time. And all I knew was she was yelling, and I could tell that she probably was intoxicated or under the influence of something. And so my 2 wonderful companions kept kind of pulling me and putting me on like the other side of them, away from her. And we'd finally called a taxi, and we were about to get in it, and this lady started just going ballistic, and I was like, what's going on? And she started going crazy. And then there was another taxi that pulled up. And so a guy got out and started yelling at the lady. I just remember that factor. And all of a sudden she was like, oh, you guys should take this taxi to us. And we're like, no, you just take the taxi. It's fine. We'll take the one that's right behind it. And she was like, oh, okay. So she got in the taxi, she left. And we got in the taxi and we were on our way to Calderon, to my very first area. And the first few minutes of the taxi ride, Hermana Cooper apologized to Hermana Castellani and was like, can I talk to Hermana Reed in Spanish or in English for a second? And she was like, oh yeah, that's fine. And so she just kind of talked to me for a few seconds, just kind of being like, are you okay? Like, what's going on? How are you feeling? Type of a deal. And that lasted about 30 seconds. Literally, because then it was, okay, now we're going to start talking to the taxi driver. And I was like, wait, what? And so they started talking with the taxi driver, and I think Hermana Castellani started, and then Hermana Cooper said something, and then they looked at me because they're like, now it's your turn. And I was like, okay. I don't even remember what I asked him, but I think it was something to do with his family, probably, because I had kind of registered a couple words that I had heard when they were talking, and so we started talking to the taxi driver, and I mean, we had a good 40 minutes in the car with him, so we're going to take advantage of those 40 minutes. That was my very first lesson in the mission field, was to not pass up a single opportunity to talk to people and to share a thought with them or anything. And I remember once we started talking to him about his family, and he had a couple kids, so we focused on that. And so we started talking about the family and the importance of the family. And I remember once we got to our apartment complex, before we got out of the car, we invited him to come to church, and we gave him a pamphlet. I don't remember what pamphlet we gave him, but we gave him one of the pamphlets, and we invited him to come to church, and we explained to him that even if you don't live in our area, there's churches throughout the greater Quito area, that you can easily find one. And there was a phone number, and we're like, call this number, and they can help you find the closest church building of yours. And so we got into our apartment, and they were like, Hermana Reed, this is your room. So we were in a trio. So our apartment had 3 different bedrooms. So it had a big living room area. It was really open. A teeny tiny kitchen. Not as tiny as the bathroom. The bathroom was even smaller. And then there was 2 bedrooms. There was 3 different bedrooms. And so the one bedroom had all 3 beds in it, because obviously we're all in the same room. So all of our beds were in that one room. And then because we had 3 different bedrooms, each of us had our own closet space. So Hermana Cooper had a closet space, Hermana Castellani had a closet space, and so did I. And so we're like, here's yours. And they're like, just start putting your stuff away, and then we'll take it from there. And I was like, okay. And so I started putting all my stuff in my closet and trying to figure out where to put things. I remember Hermana Cooper came in, and she was like, hey, do you have your bedding? And I was like, sure. So I grabbed my sheets for her, and she was like, we'll make your bed for you. And I was like, okay, thanks. That's great. So they went and they made my bed, and then I finished putting my stuff away. And we kind of did some planning, and I was really lost because I had no idea of what we were doing, who we were seeing, or any of the above. And that was the very first day in Ecuador. But the first day, actually in the field the following day, so I got up in the morning, and we got ready. And I'll just tell you now, being in a trio is not easy, because one, it's already hard enough to have 2 people getting ready, but to have that third person, it totally changes, and it affects the timing of everything. You have to manage it even more so. And so we each got up, each of us took a shower. I want to say Hermana Cooper cooked breakfast while the rest of us were getting ready. And so we had breakfast, and then we had study time. And I don't even remember what I studied that day, but I studied something. How to preach my gospel. It was probably the first lesson, I'm assuming. And then we had our companionship study. And I remember both of them going off on what all they had learned, and it was really cool. And then we tried to pull it into what the plan for the day was. And we had certain lessons we were going to teach that day. And so we kind of figured out, okay, this is the lesson. And then between Hermana Castellani and Hermana Cooper, they were trying to help me to know who these people were that we were going to teach, because I obviously hadn't met them yet. And so they were trying to just kind of give me a way to be able to know who they are, and kind of their background. And so we did that, and then we had language study for another hour. And then we took off for the day. But before we left, I remember we said a prayer. Actually, we did that every day, but we'd always say our prayers, a prayer before we left the apartment. So we left our apartment complex, and we started walking down the hill. I don't remember who we were going to see, but we were going to see somebody. And there were multiple people out on the sidewalk, and there were people walking towards us. And so Hermana Cooper leaned over to me, and she's like, remember what I said, we're not passing up an opportunity to talk to people. And I was like, okay. And so as we approached these people, she was like, Hermana Reed, you're gonna do it. And I was like, okay. And as we were getting closer and closer, and I was just like, I don't know what to say. And so we were in the process of almost passing them, and Hermana Cooper just jumped in, and so she started talking to them. And so we left, like we just did a contact with them and continued on our way. And she's like, the next one's yours. And I was like, okay. And mind you, this was a pattern for the entire time that I was with her. We kind of just flip-flop, taking turns of making the initial contact. So the next group of people came up, and I'm sure I sounded really ridiculous, but I tried my best and was like, said hello, and said who we were, or at least attempted to say who we were, that we were missionaries for the church, in my very broken Spanish at the time. And I don't even remember what they said to me. And I was like lost. And so I was so grateful that my two companions were there, and they were willing to take my back. And so they started talking to them. And so that just kind of continued throughout the day in between all of our appointments. I remember when we went to, I don't remember whose house we went to for lunch, but I remember my first lunch in the mission. And it was only the beginning of many lunches that would be very similar. But we got fed by by members of our ward. And so we went to the sister's house, and be this the first day or not, this is the first meal I remember. So she puts down the plate in front of her. We got a bowl of soup. That was our first thing. Get a bowl of soup. And then after you finish your soup, then we get the main meal, or main plate, which a normal plate size, and there would be like a pretty good mountain of rice on it. And then I think there was some sort of meat. There was sliced up avocados, which I don't really like avocados, so that was a fun experience. And then the salad, what did we have? We had beet salad. So it was boiled beets cubed up and mixed together with mayo. And that was what my first lunch was. And then a small glass of some sort of juice. I don't remember what juice it was, but it was a juice. And so I had to not think about what I was eating, and just dive in and eat it, because I knew there was going to be lots of things that I didn't want to eat, and that things that I knew I didn't like, but I would have to eat them because I'm a missionary, and it has always been my thing, and especially as a missionary. But not only that, even if I'm at a friend's house and I I'm given something, I'm going to eat what they give me, be it I like it or not, just because of courtesy aspects and manners. And so we finished eating and we continued on our way. We had many lessons that day. Multiple lessons, and I remember being lost in almost every single lesson, and that actually just continued for the next week. I was always lost in the lessons, and it was already hard trying to teach with 3 of us instead of just 2 people. My companions, they would say something, and then the next person would say something, and then they'd look at me, and I'd be like, I don't know what they said, but I'll just testify what they said because that's what I know I can say. And so that kind of continued for a while. But I don't think there's a way to really describe the first day in the mission field. 1, it's different for every single person. But 2, it is most definitely one of the most eye-opening moments of the whole time. And I remember that night I was so ready for bed. My brain hurt, my head hurt, my body hurt. I was tired like I've never been tired before. And I know a lot of it was because I had to try to concentrate and in a different language and trying to figure out what was going on and following conversation and trying to figure out how to say things and whatnot. That all just kind of added all onto each other, let alone I'd been outside and walking around for who knows how many hours that day. So let's just say I was ready for bed when bedtime came. But that after about the first week, I kind of got into the swing of things and was used to walking around, and my brain still hurt a lot just because of the language aspect and trying to learn it and trying to follow conversation and being able to speak and teach the people that we were contacting and teaching. I remember the first, actually there was 2 really crazy experiences. One, I was very grateful for Hermana Cooper. I remember one of our lessons, because everybody knew that she spoke English. I remember one of our lessons we were teaching this lady, and I don't remember what we were talking about. We were talking about something, and I was trying to formulate and trying to figure out how to say something. And so I was sitting there trying to think about it. And so this lady that we were teaching, she turned to my companion and was like, how about, or she looked at me and she's like, how about you just tell your companion in English and she'll translate it in Spanish? And as much in the back of my mind, I was like, yeah, that would be great. But my wonderful companion, was like, no, that's not going to happen. Hermana Reed is here to teach in your native tongue, and that is Spanish, and meaning she has to learn it. And if that means we have to sit here for 5 minutes while she formulates in her brain what she's going to say, then that's what we're going to do. And I remember being very frustrated in that very moment, that I was like, oh, why did you have to do that? But it was actually a very pivotal moment of my very first area, because 1, she could have easily just been like, yeah, that's not a problem. But instead, she focused on the purpose and the reasons that we were here. And she knew that I needed to be able to teach in that moment, and that I needed to have that experience and that learning. And looking back, I'm very grateful for that. And about, 3 weeks after that experience, I want to say, we were teaching a mom and a daughter that we had ran into like the second week of my mission, or of my time in the area. And we were over at their house, and we were teaching them, and they had come to church a couple times, and so we were trying to figure out what was going on, because they had all of a sudden kind of disappeared. And so we were trying to figure out what was happening and why they didn't want to come to church and stuff like that. And I remember sitting there and I was just listening to what they were saying. And my companions, they were each teaching and whatnot, and sharing their testimonies. And all of a sudden, I just opened my mouth, and I couldn't tell you what I said, but I remember I just started saying many things, but mainly like my testimony and the importance of church, and having the courage to overcome the obstacles and the fears that we have as humans. And I remember something about those gists, and I remember afterwards thinking about it, and I was like, I have no idea where half of that came from, because many of them were words that I didn't even, or at least didn't think that I knew. And all that I had figured it out in my head, and I was saying it in English, and I was like, this is what I want to say. And I remember just kind of repeating and being like, this is what I want to say. And that was probably my first real experience of, I guess you could say, truly teaching by the Spirit, but more specifically having the gift of tongues, and having it truly be, it wasn't me teaching, and it was purely, Heavenly Father, I need to get to them, and I'm going to open my mouth, and I'm going to trust you that what needs to be said is going to be said right now. And I remember they were completely speechless, everybody, including my companions. And we kind of sat there in silence for a few minutes, or for probably a minute or two, and then both of my companions were like, yeah, and they just kind of kept it going from there. And I want to say they came to church the next week, and then they kind of disappeared again, but we tried. That's all we could do. But I remember we were on our way back to our apartment, and my companion turned, and she just looked at me, and she had the biggest smile on her face, and she's like, I was waiting for that moment. I was like, what? And she's like, I was waiting for that moment when you would just open your mouth and the words would just come, and have you not be thinking about it, and have you not be freaking out about it, but just teaching. And she's like, I have been waiting. And all of us, that was a big testimony building moment for all three of us as a whole. But that was one of my, I don't know, coolest experiences, I guess you could say, at least out of my first area. And that wasn't my first week, but it really, I don't know, yeah.